go ahead and change that in the participants. You should be able to right click on it and then change your name if you want to. So if you want to have these slides to follow along with or to save to your Google Drive, you can copy that URL. It is case sensitive, so that'll take you to our Google Slides that you are welcome to use and adapt for whatever reason and however you want. So if you don't know, you are in Podcast Like a Pro for students and educators. And I am Malia Hoffman. I am an assistant professor at Cal State Fullerton, and my handle is Optimist Malia. You can use that for both Twitter and most other things as well.
And I'm Christiane Signs. I'm a 6th grade teacher in the Savannah School District, and my handle is Christiane Signs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure it's the same on Instagram and Twitter and all the things as well.
Yeah. All right. So first of all, why podcasts, right? Podcasts are super popular. They're a really good way to reach people in all corners, places on the planet. And here are some statistics that we found with an infographic that we will note on the third slide.
So podcasting stats and facts, 2019 US podcast statistics. So these little, but we've had a couple of years off due to COVID. So 51% of the US population has listened to a podcast. That's a lot. If you ask me, 49% of podcast listening is done at home, and it's all connected. So 22% of listening is done. Probably at work is my guess. Okay. 20% is done at work. Podcast listeners are loyal, affluent, and educated. I'm a podcast listener.
I'm a podcast listener.
Yeah. Malia starts most of her conversations with, so I was listening to a podcast.
Yeah.
And then you just have to wait for the ending there. So 80% listen to all or most of each podcast episode and listens to an average of 7 shows per week. I would say I fall into that because I tend to listen to the same shows and the same ones until someone brings a new one along. And then even then, I don't always get into the whole episode though, if someone just requests it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
There's your little percentage of US pop listening monthly, says the entire episode, 35%. You can read the graphics. 3% don't know. Some listen to only the beginning, but for the most part, you listen to it in full. So, and looks like men, 56% are men and 44% are women. And then there you go. It's grown, obviously, just like any technology based user. So 2013, it was at 10%. And in 2019, it was all the way up to 30%.
And
so
I would guess if anything,
it's higher now.
Past COVID, I think a lot of people either got into podcasting or got into listening to podcasts.
That's what I was
thinking too. But this was the most recent infographic I could find. And that reference is listed there, and that will take you directly to that where that's hosted.
I think I picked up like 3 different podcasts during COVID.
Yeah. So we're going to get into these a little bit more in detail, but getting started. So you need to define your topic, and then you'll choose your tools, and then you'll think about what will make it successful. So you have to think about what it is that you want to share. Are you wanting to share your own expertise? Are you wanting to share your students' expertise? Are you wanting to just talk to people, get information out? You have to think about the what, right? And then think about who's your audience, because that's important. So you have to think about what are they interested in? What's not done yet? So we know that there are a lot of podcasts out there in the realm. So you have to think about what's not done and who's your audience. Are you trying to go viral, or are you trying to meet like a niche audience, like maybe the families and the caregivers of your students, or just your community? And then is this going to be a collaborative effort, or are you going to do this alone? And will you use interviews, or will you just talk? So all of these things are things to consider when you're getting started. You should also consider what your schedule will be. And so it is good practice to set a schedule that you will release on the same day every month, or the same day every week, or maybe you release every single day. But that way it gives your audience an expectation that they can get in the habit of, and then knowing to keep coming back. So you also need to think about what tools you have available and if you have a budget for this. And so if you do have a budget, you can buy more equipment. There are some great microphones, great sound booth equipment, things like that you can do, but you certainly can do it with just your computer. And that's how I do it. You will need to spend a little bit of money to subscribe to an RSS host. We will talk about that a bit more. Unless you don't care about it going viral or being published publicly, you might plan to put it in your LMS or in your Google Drive, and then just share links with your network. And that is certainly fine too. And then if you subscribe to an RSS feed, then you can push that out to Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, and then there's a whole bunch more that are connected as well. But you should also consider where it is that you will record, because having a quiet location is very important. That could be a closet. It could be your office. It could be a sound booth, whatever's available to you. But when you start, you don't necessarily have to worry about those things as much, but you'll start to listen and you'll hear the gardener outside or the fire trucks running by. And so you might want to reconsider those things when you are pushing out content. You also need to think about things that will make it successful. So you'll want to share that through social media, through your friends, through your colleagues, maybe post it in your email signature block. You'll also need to consider, what are you going to use for album art? Are you going to draw something? You cannot just take something off of Google because those, even though you can access them for free, they're not copyright free. So you might want to have something that you design or a friend designs or something like that. And same thing with intro music. So remember copyright law. And GarageBand, if you have access to Mac, makes a really easy way for you to put together some intro music. Or if you know people or students or others who would record something for an intro music, that's simple enough. And it really doesn't need to be very long. 15 seconds is plenty. And of course, ask for people for help, because you don't have to do it all by yourself. So you want to also define your topic. So what is your niche? What are you an expert at? What do you want to talk about?
And what's interesting, I like to think of it as, what do other people want to hear about too? Mm-hmm. So you want to kind of find that balance, because you want to connect it to the world, obviously, if you want other people to listen to it, or you're just talking to yourself.
Yeah, which you don't need to record it and do that if you want to talk to yourself. Mm-hmm. And then obviously you just need one person to listen, mm-hmm. and then they tell someone else. Like Christiane said, I
pass it all.
I tell everyone, every podcast I ever listen to, and it's probably annoying, but
it's never annoying.
I like to give attribution to my sources. So
yeah.
So when you're thinking about content, these are some tips. Do you want to cover that?
Yeah. So you want to outline your content for each episode. So you don't want to go into it completely blind, or you're going to be doing that a lot. And there's nothing, when you're speaking, public speaking, than hearing someone say every 2 seconds. So make sure you outline content for each episode. Make a script, write it down. That doesn't mean you have to write word for word down, depending with students, and we'll touch on that later. If you're working in the classroom with it, students might want a script to follow, but as far as adults, you want it to be more conversational. So if you're interviewing, yes, create a loose list of questions, know what you're going to ask them, and in return, we'll cover it again. Make sure your person you're interviewing might know some of those questions so that they're not thrown for a loop. I've been on both ends of the interview process in a podcast, and it is nice to know how to prepare for that as being the interviewee. So edit it, and it's okay to redo it. Don't be afraid to do retakes. Sometimes the sound, something might happen in the background, something might go off, a car alarm or a fire truck, something might go. edit it out or stop for a second while you're doing the podcast and then come back to it. Listen to yourself, listen to the finished product to self-assess. You will notice the things that you do that might annoy you as a listener. And I know Malia has some of those things too that she's done when she's listened back to herself, and you can pick those out and then kind of change it for the next time.
And so if I can add to that, one of the things that I've noticed that doesn't translate into face-to-face conversation that you do in face-to-face conversation that doesn't translate into a podcast is those verbal, audible nods of affirmation, right? So we'll say, yeah, But when you're doing that in a podcast, it's very distracting. And that's something that I learned through the course of recording and doing podcasts, is that you just got to stop doing that. You can
just listen.
You can nod so that your guest knows. But if you're just doing a recording, you should just listen.
It's something you don't think about. And until you told me that, like something I don't think about. And then I was like, oh, when I listen to podcasts and they're interviewing, you are right. No one responds, because as a listener, the listener's doing the responding because you're in that conversation with the person in the podcast. So just better to listen to the person you're interviewing and not have those verbal, oh, great moments. But we're taught to do that when we talk. So that's the hard part. It's hard,
especially as a teacher, right?
Yeah, exactly. Try recording in different rooms, listen and adjust if needed. Like Malia said, you can go in a closet. Maybe there's another room that has better, like the acoustics from the walls. That's going to make it sound better. So figure out what works best for you and go from there. Maybe you have to hang stuff to make it sound better too. So,
and we're going to go over some tools that you can get that will help with the sound later on as well.
And then maintain a consistent schedule so that people can count on your new episodes. I look forward to podcasts on Sundays. Sometimes I know there's one that rolls out every Sunday or used to roll out consistently every Sunday.
Yeah.
And I would get excited and be like, ooh, it's Sunday podcast day. So it is nice for the listeners, kind of like a new episode of TV. Same thing. We get excited for the new episode and we want to watch it. Same, we want to listen to the podcast. So make a consistent schedule so it doesn't surprise everyone and they miss it.
Yeah. So you also want to script your podcast and this.
Yes. So like I said, writing the script for the podcast, we broke it up into two, the classroom. So if you're doing it for your students as a teacher, or if you're doing it for you as, just an educator or someone to put it out into that world. So in the classroom, we would recommend the students do write it out. It's the process of their learning, their writing, and they're reading back, and it's going to help those speaking and listening skills as well. And it'll help them to not pause, be focused, and just go. It might sound kind of like a play, but that's fine. They're going to learn from that. They need to practice before they record, just to make them more comfortable and make it fluid and sound more like a conversation. Find the timing. For students, going to be way more strict. They need to find the timing of how they're going to talk to each other. Let them know that pausing is okay. They don't have to go super fast and they can take their time because the listener sometimes needs those pauses to reflect on things. So they want to highlight their part when they write their script out, kind of like they're doing a play, I said, where they want to know where they're going, or I've noticed for students, they will get lost in their writing. So it'll be me and I'm like, oh shoot, I don't know where I am. And then that kind of ruins their whole flow for the conversation. So, and then they can read from it. For us as adults, just doing a podcast for everybody, not necessarily in the classroom. It doesn't necessarily have to be scripted, like we said, word for word, verbatim, but write bulleted points and kind of highlight the things. I circle the important stuff, just like I'm going to do a speech to a class or to something else. I'm going to circle it, highlight it, create authenticity within it. Obviously, you don't want to steal anything. You want to make it yours. Find the timing again. Do not read it. So different from the classroom, you don't want to read it because you want to sound completely natural. You want your listeners to be involved and in there. I listen in the car and sometimes I feel like I'm right there with them in the studio when they're doing their podcast. You want to have that feeling like they're there. So make it more natural and fluid. If you're doing an interview, like we said, send the questions ahead of time so that they know what they're going to say, how to answer them. Maybe they need to do a little research to answer some of those questions beforehand. So it is always nice to throw them out there. But it's also okay to come up with them on the spot too. But the deeper ones, when you're really getting into the interview process with them, you'll want to give it to them ahead of time.
So we mentioned some tools, and I mentioned that I just use my computer, and that seems to work really well. So I have a Mac, which has GarageBand, which is my preferred tool, but you can use Audacity, which is cross-platform, and that makes it super easy as well. If you have tablets have built-in software too. So if you're just using the audio, no video, you can certainly just use the built-in microphone on the tablets. If you have iPads, they have a GarageBand as well. And you can also purchase other equipment like special microphones, which I did buy a real nice microphone, and I struggled getting it to work and to connect, and so it really just has gone unused for a couple of years. So I just kind of wasted money on that, but personal anecdote.
It happens.
As I mentioned, you'll need a subscription to an RSS feed if you do want to publish and share that with, a broader audience. And it's relatively inexpensive. I want to say, and I can't quite recall, but I think it's around like $10 a month, something like that, to host your content through rss.com. And that's what I use. You can certainly use other streaming services. YouTube, you can post content for free. There are limitations on that. And that's, I think, becoming a bigger, more popular podcast host as well. You can podcast with Chromebooks. And so with that, you will, here are some tools that you would need to connect to. So Synth is one of the recording apps online that you could connect to. Screencastify, and it does have just an audio only feature, but you can certainly do screencasts and video recordings with that. And then there is Simple Audio Recorder as well that lets you do some other editing and video recording within that app. And so you can also edit on Chromebooks with some tools called WeVideo, Soundtrap, beautiful audio editor. I have not experienced these because I don't use Chromebooks. However, I know that a lot of schools do. And so there are some resources here on this site as well. So we'll share the link to the slides again so you can have access to that. Go ahead.
So recording, choose the software. Go with what you're comfortable with and what you know. And I would recommend playing around with it beforehand. So get in there, find the things that work, that don't work. I've watched Malia use GarageBand before, and she knows her way around it. So that's her favorite, right? That's the one she's going to stick with. So choose a software that works for you. Maybe it needs to be something a little easier, and that's okay, as long as it gets the job done. Find a quiet room. Like we said before, you can use a closet. You can use a bathroom. Sometimes bathrooms are really good for recording because if you've ever, you sang in the shower or something, the acoustics in there are really good. Maybe it's too echoey though. So if it is, you can use foam, pillows, blankets, anything to try to take that echo away. Go ahead.
Yeah. In fact, I was listening to a podcast that was by NPR, and she was traveling because she was doing interviews, and she had stated on her podcast that she was in fact sitting in the closet in the hotel room with pillows and blankets around her to create this small sound booth. So, yeah.
And that kind of goes back to, like you said, the microphone. Like we said, listen back to what you record, because if I remember correctly, sometimes the microphone will give you feedback, or it can sound a little more echoey. And so and especially if you have someone else you're speaking to who's not in the same, room, and maybe it is an interview process, you kind of want those sounds to match a little bit. You don't want it to completely sound like you're in two different places, or every time they speak, it's going to take your listener away from.
And with that, there is on GarageBand, there are different audio settings, track settings that you can choose, and some will just say audio and some will say, like we'll have the microphone, and it gives it a different sound. And so in fact, last Sunday, I recorded a podcast, and I recorded it in one of the microphone tracks. And when I listened to it back, it was very, very echoey. So I was able to copy and paste it into just a plain audio setting to make it sound a little bit more softer and more like they were in the same room.
It's because you know your software.
It's because I played around and I listened. I re-listened to
yes,
it.
like we said. But same thing. And that's the other reason, play with the software, get to know it, and try out those different microphones, or try out the different things you can do in it to see what sounds best. What do you want it to sound like? Maybe you want your voice lower. Play with it. See if you can get your voice lower. Do multiple takes. That's okay. Do it more than once. Just prepare. If there's someone else on the other end of it, let them know. We might have to do this more times. Especially your first couple, you might have to do multiple times. Listen and re-listen. We can't say it enough. And also you can always send it off to somebody else to re-listen and give you feedback. So I know Malia's big on that, in accepting that feedback.
Yeah, there was one of my listeners had given feedback about how quiet the recording actually turned out, and then how they had to like turn their sound way up on their device that they were listening to it. And they said that they recommended in the recording process turning the volumes up on everything all the way. So that was something I wouldn't have known actually without someone else telling me that.
Yeah. And sometimes there's little glitches, and it's okay if you don't listen to the whole thing, but hopefully someone will reach out and say, hey, there's a glitch in this area of the podcast. Okay, go back and you can readjust it.
Yeah.
Always turn off the alarms. Any alarms on your phone or your computers, turn your phones off or put them on do not disturb, and any alerts. So if you're doing it on your computer and those email alerts come through, you're going to hear everything and anything that comes through on your computer. So if you are signed into your email and your recording and you get a new email, it's going to alert you. If you're signed into some sort of, I know we don't use it anymore, like instant messenger or anything like that, that's going to ding or give a sound, your computer is going to pick it up, or GarageBand, whatever tool you're using for software, is going to pick it up. And then it's going to be that like, ooh, okay. Yeah. So,
and in my experience, there was a incredibly like deep, impactful poem that one of our guests were reading, and my colleague's phone rang in the middle of it, and it ruined the mood.
It does.
It ruined the mood.
It throws everything off.
Yeah.
So just turn it all off, and make sure your guests do.
Yeah.
If you have a guest or you're doing an interview, tell them ahead of time to please turn all these things off before you get started.
And to your point, when I schedule podcasts, in that calendar invite, I have a whole list of this is what you should do before we record. And then I have a list of all the things like turn your sound off, check your sound on Zoom,
Wi-Fi, check your Wi-Fi.
Check your Wi-Fi, go in a quiet room, send your kids away for an hour.
No distractions. You really do. Yeah. It's very detailed.
Yeah, it is.
But it needs to be.
It does. I mean, obviously these have grown because people haven't done that.
Because it's happened. And yeah.
Okay. So when you're producing your podcast, so you might have someone else produce it, and that's fine. Or you might do it all yourself, or, assign roles to students. That's fine. So the producer should also be re-listening to hear the playback, how that turns out. There was a guest that I had with a gardener in the background with the, the leaf blower, and I tried to pull that out, and then it distorted my voice in it. And so that was just, that was a challenge. Unfortunately, I wasn't really able to make it better. That would be one that I would like to redo, but since we do podcast in a natural, authentic way, I just took it.
It was okay. You got used to it.
Yeah. Not my best work. But also, play with different track types, right? So as I mentioned, when using GarageBand, you can add in, vocals, you can add in audio, you can add in all these different tools. So, record yourself saying something, and then, play with it and move it around and see what sound it is that you're looking for. You'll want to cut out long pauses. You want to cut out sneezes, coughs, barking dogs. Sorry, Henry's here. He was whining and barking a little bit earlier. Sirens, anything that you can cut out, you want to try to do that. If it's in the middle of them talking, people get it, right? So it's not the end of the world. It just depends on like what you're after, right? Are you trying to go for like studio quality? Or are you trying to make it a little more authentic?
And if that happens, just stop.
Yeah.
Wait for it to end.
Yeah.
Or hope it ends
Mhm.
if it's a barking dog. And if you are interviewing, just stop them nicely. Just be like, and go back and repeat that question and do it all over again, because then that cutting process is going to be that much smoother, rather than if you don't start that question over to try to pick up where they were and then piece it together. It's like, we're going to do that whole question again. So make it authentic if you can.
And during that time, I find if I can, I can stop the recording. So that way there's a break in the take. So that way, when I go back, I know exactly where it is. Or if I write down the number, because it'll give you a time ticker across the top. So that way I know what time to go back without having to like re-listen to everything, to go and make sure to edit those things out. And as mentioned, you want to do some sort of intro music before or after. It doesn't have to be music. It can be an intro of some sort, right? Every show you listen to, every podcast you listen to has some sort of intro. And then something to close it up at the end.
I was gonna say, I feel like that's sometimes what brings the listener in, like the little music before. Sometimes, that's the thing that connects our brain to what we're about to listen to.
Yeah.
So in finding something that is, just kind of that perfect start, I would say that, I don't know, just thinking about it. Like if you think about like commercials, when you hear the jingle, it takes you back. So, or yes, like you said, an intro, but
yeah. And then you'll want to share any pre or post information. So as we mentioned, like share the information with your viewers, or your interviewees, what you want them to, how they want them to prepare. And then also share the final product, tell them when it's going to be posted, tag them in your post. So that way they can share it with their network too. And that's probably where you're going to get a lot of your listeners, is from the network of the guests that you have. And then as you move on, you can decide if you want to add in promotions or advertisements. People do make money from their podcasts. I do not, but
you're not doing it for the money.
I am not, but I do put in a little plug for the nonprofit that it's associated with, and then just give them our handle for donations. So
this is you.
Yeah. So we recommend RSS.com. I have experience with it. It's super, super easy. Your first episode that you host on there is free. So that's a bonus. So you can play with it before you actually commit to it. It allows you to upload some album art. It will give you a public podcast website if you choose to have that, which is kind of cool. And then it also will post to the podcast directories, meaning it will automatically connect it to Spotify, Apple, all of those directories. And there's a bunch more in there, but those are the two that I use mostly. So that's why I connect to it. You can also personally go in and connect to your Spotify account and then connect it in that way, which is also pretty easy to do. And what I mentioned is the podcast directories, it will automatically submit it to the sites that you choose. And then anytime you go and upload a new, so RSS.com is going to be the tool that you go to upload the audio that you recorded, upload the video that you recorded. If you want specific episode art, you can attach that as well. And then you put in the information that would be associated with that, the title, episode number, and then also just like a little blurb. So that way your guests or your listeners know what they're listening to. And then once you publish it to RSS.com, you do not have to go and push it to Spotify, push it to Apple, push it to Stitcher. It will automatically do that, which is really handy. And it just saves you a bunch of time.
Good.
Yep. So here are some recommended resources, just as a refresher. So RSS.com, you can certainly look at other sites. Spotify podcasts. So if you Google it, it'll walk you right through how to connect your Spotify account to your RSS feed. Same thing with Apple. Stitcher and Garage. Stitcher is another podcast host that you can use. GarageBand is what I use. Audacity is another. If you're a PC person, Audacity is a free download software that you can use to record. And that is what I actually first learned how to record podcasts on before I was a Mac person.
Audacity was?
Mhm.
Look at you.
I know.
Learning all the things, learning all the things. Promoting your product. So professional appearance, like Malia said, create original album art. You can't steal, just like in real life. We can't steal anything from anyone. So make it your own. Have someone create it for you if you want, if you know an artist, or maybe it's a picture of you that's original. So make sure your album art is original. Create original intro music and exit music. Same thing. We can't steal someone's music. You can't use Taylor Swift or Lady Gaga. It's theirs, unless you know them personally and you ask them for permission. Use students, friends, family, all of them to help to create and support. Those are the people that are going to support you. Those are the people that are going to push it out, get you known. Especially, like, I know my mom tells everybody to listen to whatever I tell her to. So,
and they'll post reviews too, and the
Yeah.
reviews help you get noticed as well.
Yeah.
So,
and it gets you up there to the top. So use your people, use your community. So you can even have, if you're doing this in the classroom, the students can create their own artwork. So that's something fun for them too. So we're getting all the standards in there: reading, writing, art,
visual and performing
yeah,
arts.
see,
also connecting to the multiple learning preferences.
Yes. So I just want to say, this reminds me, maybe I'm the only one. I was just thinking about this during this. We had podcasts before podcasts, because if you were like me as a kid, you had your tape player out and you pushed the record and you were like a radio station.
Yep.
So it's just what we're doing with the kids, but now we're actually doing it for real.
Yeah.
So social media, publish where your audience is. So know the audience you're trying to reach. Is it going to be Facebook? Is it going to be Instagram? Is it going to be LinkedIn? Who's your audience? If it's more business and you're trying to go for that higher profile business, it might not be Facebook. Facebook is more closed, personal, harder to find those public friends. Instagram's a little more open, but I know like LinkedIn, you can post on LinkedIn.
Yeah. So Instagram is a bit more of a younger platform.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to reach a younger crowd, then that's where you should be. Yes, LinkedIn, you can post publicly into the feeds there. But your network might be broader and it's usually a bit more business focused. So LinkedIn is a good place too, if you are the professional trying to share with other professionals. Now, if you're trying to share your students' stuff, consider where their families and caretakers are in the social media realm.
And I would say Instagram's a place where you can post things and people can see it without, like, Facebook is very private. Yeah. So Instagram, you can just make it public and everyone can see it.
Of course, make sure you have your students' media releases. Yes. If their likeness or name or faces are on it. Obviously that goes mostly without saying, but I feel like I have to say it.
Yeah.
And also you can have a public podcast, I guess, feed for Instagram, like a handle or whatever, an account for that. If you want to, you can also post it in like Seesaw or Google.
Yeah, I'd say post it for them, maybe not for, and they're in charge then. If they want to post it on their social media, they can, but maybe it is just a classroom and family thing that the school can see and it doesn't get pushed out to the world. But going back, it says post in your LMS, websites, multiple platforms. I was just going to say, why settle for just one? If you're trying to be seen, you're trying to be known, post it in all of them. See who then, like, who's it going to attract then and who's going to push it out for you after that. I know with a lot of them, the nice thing is you can actually link, like your Spotify, you can actually put that link there, like, listen here. They can click it from wherever you're posting it and it'll take them straight to your podcast. So an easier way for them to get to it and favorite it and do all of that. So promote at all stages, the creating, prior to launch date and publication date. And then feedback. Like we said, ask for reviews, feedback, ideas, give it to people and say, how do you feel? Keep an open mind because you want it to be great and you want people to listen to it. So it's not the time to kind of have that closed mind and think, this is what I want though, this is my vision. Because your vision might need to be broader And if you want to get all of those listeners and you want to get that crowd, then you have to be open to sometimes the criticism of what worked and what didn't work. But that's why we do it, right? And give it to those you're comfortable hearing the feedback from. If you have that friend that you can't stand hearing feedback from, don't give it to them. So, and then solicit future topics as well. Let them know what's coming up. Let people know this is what we're going to talk about. In a couple weeks, we're going to touch on marine biology. Get them excited so that they want to come back and listen for more. And I would say take note to the podcasts that have the most, the feedbacks or likes on your whatever platform you're putting it on, because you're going to want to look for more topics like that then, right? If that's the one that got the most hits, then you're going to want to continue maybe and do another one to just keep bringing people in. So
that sums up our podcasting information. If you have more questions or if you want to talk about this further, again, that's my handle and that's my email. I think in one of more of the emails, my name was spelled wrong. So note that there should be 2 N's on my last name, and I will respond. We're going to post this on YouTube and then connect it to our website where all the other webinar series are advertised, and also it'll be hosted so you can go back and review it as well. And then if you don't mind providing us with some feedback, and we'll post this link into, oh, that's not what I meant to do, but that's okay. We'll post the feedback link here in the chat. And give me 1 second. Here's the feedback link. If you don't mind filling that out, I'm going to also post the link to the slides so you can have that. And feel free to add it to your drive, your Google Drive, or if you want to make a copy of them, that's fine as well. And that was it, right? Oh, we have some resources here. Yep. So these resources are hyperlinked to where we got all the information, and then also where you can start connecting to getting your RSS account set up, connecting your Stitcher account to it, connecting your Apple account, connecting your Spotify account. These things are very helpful. I said that it like walks you through it. It literally walks you through it. I just didn't find the value in me going over that. So, but if you run into something, or if you want some one-on-one help, I'm happy to help you with that. And then here, are some other articles about, best recording software. And this is from Stitcher's, like their podcasting report. So apparently Stitcher is one of the leading tools, I guess, or hosts for podcasts, which surprises me, but who knew? So yeah, like I said, those are all linked there. So again, here's my contact. And if you have any questions, please let me know. You can certainly add something into the chat, and we look forward to seeing you on more presentations later on in the school year.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.